Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. For those familiar and new to the podcast, I'm Sarah, and thanks for joining me today. In this episode, I'll be talking to Blair Forrest, the founder of AMZ Prep, a full-service Amazon fulfillment business that helps sellers streamline their logistics. Blair guides us through his entrepreneurial journey, how it kicked off at a young age and led him to start a full-fledged business from his college dorm room. Now one of the fastest growing startups in Canada, he's become a logistics and entrepreneurship ace, all by the age of 24. Blair explains the different ways that Amazon sellers can optimize their logistics and how to translate this into better ROI. Blair also reveals insights into the Amazon landscape and how business owners can navigate the current challenges in the industry. If logistics and shipping are creating a bottleneck in your business, then listen closely to this episode to find the solutions you've been searching for. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. Really great to have you guys back today. We've got a cool guest on today's show. We've got Blair Forrest joining us today from AMZ Prep. So Blair, how you doing today?
Absolutely fantastic. Sarah, I'm living the dream, I think is the best way to say it.
Living the dream. Where in the world are you living this dream from?
The cold and mighty Toronto, Canada. It's funny, I know with Greg, your guys' content, he was born and raised in Alaska, or I know he was working up there for some time. So before we were chatting about how crazy it gets, but yeah, the cold Toronto, I think right now it's around negative 20 outside. So,
oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm just like, all of my body just internally went, no. Oh my God, no. I'm home visiting Virginia at the moment. And even this adjustment to Virginia, which is definitely not negative 20, has been enough to complain about and feel like I've got some ground to stand on. But now you just took that ground away. You're making me look bad here.
It's a different level up here. So as long as you pack warm, I think I'm used to it. But yeah, I could use some of the US weather pretty soon.
Oof, God, I can only imagine. I don't know if you're like Greg. Greg growing up in Alaska's got, they've got polar bears and stuff. So Greg has legitimate crazy cold weather, ice animals stories. I'm imagining Toronto's not the same.
It's not the same. Greg, I think he's built from the outdoors up there. So his wilderness is what I aspire to be. But yeah, I'm still a city boy at heart. So maybe one day, but traffic and the Toronto skyline is probably the most activity I've got. So.
You know what? I bet in many ways that's wild enough, which I'm sure we'll get into this podcast, because you're just talking a bit offline and hearing a little bit about your story, like understanding that you're coming from this corner of logistics. You know, a lot of people probably have a sense of knowing something about it because they might work with it within the realm of, say, their Amazon business or the e-commerce business. But I think it's a whole other beast to actually really be into it the way you are. So I'm really excited to get your perspective on that. One of the coolest things I think about you is I understand that you've been an entrepreneur from a young age, and I think are still currently a young age. So walk me through your entrepreneurial journey and how you ended up to where you are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in its shortest form, without having to go too deep in it, and we absolutely can. So I don't know, Sarah, I was kind of always just an entrepreneur from a young age. So I was kind of the eBay hustler, the garage sales beast. It was just natural for me growing up. So going through high school, I was going to garage sales, and I was reselling the products on, at the time it was Craigslist, which was popular. I am still old enough to know Craigslist, so everyone can give me a break on that. But then I'd also be selling the products on eBay. Facebook market was a bit stronger than it was way back when. And I was doing that all throughout high school, where I would just go to these garage sales, buy low, sell high model. It was really it. And it was when eBay was like really big. So I was making some fair money, and it was just throughout high school as kind of a part-time gig. So it naturally made sense. And going into university, this is where I ended up learning about Amazon. And what I ended up figuring out was that similar to what I was doing on eBay at the time, where I could basically just buy and resell products, I started doing this on Amazon as well. I don't know how I was briefing you guys on it beforehand, but I did Amazon way back when. So it was 2013 when I actually started selling on Amazon at the time. And it was in my second year of university, and I actually bought these baby caddies, Sarah. If you saw them, especially any Amazon seller would cringe when they hear it, just off the basis of it's kind of like the garlic press, Sarah. And you've probably heard of the kind of the theme of like the products you should not sell on Amazon is like baby caddies, garlic presses. And there's a couple of like the uncharted territory that I thought were a good idea at the time.
Well, call that in for me, like as to why, because everyone might not know why.
It ended up just being a couple of those products that Helium 10 and Jungle Scout and all these tools weren't really a thing at the time. So as a seller, there wasn't as many ways to just calculate sales, right? So what I was actually doing, and I think some of the early sellers would actually appreciate this, is that there was a technique where you would go into Amazon checkout page on a product. You would type in like 1,000 units, and Amazon would actually tell you how many they have left in stock.
Oh, okay.
And what you do for the next 2 weeks is every day you'd go to the checkout, you'd put in 1,000 units, and then Amazon would say, hey, we only have 57 units left, right? So then every day you can get an estimate of how many sales they have left, right? Just off of how many units are going down. And this was like our manual way of trying to forecast how many units they were selling. And baby caddies, garlic presses at the time, and it just so happened a lot of people were looking at the time, it was one of those products that looked great, but then 6 months happened, everyone sourced the product, and the market became kind of hyper flooded very, very quickly. And it became kind of one of these spaces on Amazon that were the kind of the roundabout jokes of the Amazon space. And baby caddies was one of those, essentially.
Okay.
So what I ended up doing, Sarah, and how it kind of leads into where AMZ Prep started, I was actually shipping these products to my university dorm. I was in university all this time in a small little city in Waterloo, Ontario. What was happening though was like, and you can imagine, Sarah, the idea of baby caddies isn't always the most popular conversation to be having with all my university friends, and us preparing these packages inside my university dorm. So we were sending all these baby caddies here. I was doing the preparation, the labeling from my dorm just between classes. And we were still doing some great sales because I had a couple different products and I was just reselling a bunch of products. Just what ended up happening was that obviously the dorm and the university wasn't too happy with what we were doing, as you can imagine. So I got a really small warehouse just outside the city. And Sarah, I think calling it a warehouse is a bit of an overstatement. It was a hole in the wall more than anything. It was around 400 square feet. So the size
it's not big. That's like a size of a tiny house. I think that counts as like, we won't count that as like a dwelling or something, at least under 400.
Yeah, like an over glorified hallway, I think is the best way to say it. So we used that for a bit, and it was just to prepare all of our products that we were selling to Amazon. It was like baby caddies. It was some random products we were buying from Costco and all these different locations, doing this whole arbitrage style model of selling products online. But what ended up happening was that I was pretty active in the Amazon spaces between the Facebook groups, and there was these forums. And what ended up happening was that there was a few sellers that reached out to me saying, hey, can you guys actually prepare some of our products? We'll just pay you to do it. And in Canada at the time, there wasn't too many solutions like this. You had really big warehouses, 3PLs, these kind of gigantics in the world that had very high monthly minimums in terms of how much they had to charge you every month just to be working with them. And there wasn't too much of this, what you call a prep center. In the US, it was very popular. There was a lot at the time where you could send your Amazon products to, they would label the products, they would track it in a Google Sheet, and then they would send it out. But in Canada, there just wasn't too much at the time. So if you sold on Amazon, your options were pretty limited. You could either send it to your own garage, and obviously your wife might have you sleeping on the couch, or you send it to a really big warehouse who probably doesn't understand Amazon. They're probably going to mess up the labels, they're going to mess up the packaging, and they're going to charge you an arm and leg for it. So we took on a couple of clients just because I wanted to cover the cost of the warehouse, and I was still studying. So it just made a lot of sense to make some extra money on the side. But what ended up happening was this domino effect over the next 6 months, where we started getting more customers, referrals started coming in. We finally launched a website because we had a little bit more ability, and I hired 2 or 3 staff just to help me do all the preparation, not only for our own products, but for some of my people in the Amazon space that were using overglorified warehouse to prepare the products. And one thing led to another. We moved into our second warehouse, which was around 1,200 square feet, so a little bit better. And then we moved a few more warehouses, and then we landed in my third year of university in a city called Brampton, right outside Toronto. And that warehouse was around 40,000 square feet, so much larger. And since then, over the past 2 years, we just quickly started scaling it up. So now we have 5 different warehouses, and then we utilize a network of partner warehouses as well. So our warehouses, we have around 400,000 square feet. An equivalent, it's tough to say, it's a lot of football fields, I think is the best way to compare.
I was about to say, you went from like 400 square feet, to like 400,000 square feet. Is that correct?
Yeah, it sounds a little bit easier of a story, but yes.
Wow.
Yeah, we just got a new warehouse around a month ago. So really what it's came down to, and I just graduated around 6 months back. So from an entrepreneurial end, I was doing this all while juggling school, which was kind of a whole different session on its own. But so that's really where it started, was kind of from the garage sales to Amazon to kind of seeing just where a gap where I naturally fell in. And from there, we just really started to double down because we needed it. We were pretty early in the time and brands really needed the help. So it naturally, all the puzzle pieces, I think, just all started to connect simultaneously. So it was timing and execution, I think, kind of perfectly molded into one.
Oh man. I mean, hearing that, it's just such an incredible journey. Now, this is like totally backtracking to something you said and probably hardly as relevant as everything we're about to get into. But my thought when you were talking about running this, it sounded like from your uni or from your dorms, like, did you get kicked out? What point were they like, hey, you're running a business from here, we're going to clamp down on that? Or did they not know? Or are they just not super bothered?
They weren't too happy about it. Yeah, they didn't take the kindness of it. Obviously, like, university was enough, and like I was getting my friends in the dorm to try to do it. It's just difficult, especially you can envision Pallet, Sarah, arriving at a university dorm. One, we didn't really have a lot of space to begin with. So they weren't too happy about it.
Typically in the dorm.
Yeah. So they gave us a couple warning. So we had to kind of pull back. But I got the warehouse pretty quickly. I think that was probably my biggest leap, where I had to sign, I was a 1-year contract to get this 400 square foot warehouse that only lasted us a few months. But in short, yeah, we got in trouble, but we got through it.
Yeah. The reason I asked is like, I'm thinking, without going into like too terrible of an offshoot, but my older brother is just like this natural entrepreneur, I think a lot like you. And in college, he started an accidental business from college. He was making omelets in the middle of the night, and they happened to be delicious and they happened to smell good. So people would start wandering the halls, be like up late studying, whatever. And it's like, man, something smells really good and I'm hungry. Where is this coming from? They'd come knocking on his door and he'd come out and be like, oh yeah, you want an omelet? Yeah, sure. Like, oh, here, like a couple bucks. I'll make you an omelet. And then this became a thing. And he started putting omelets next to the vents in his room, so it would further like waft through the building, and more people would come wandering around like wanting an omelet. And then it became a full-fledged business. And when his college found out, basically he got shut down, obviously, because you're not meant to run omelet businesses at 3 a.m. from your dorm room.
Sure.
But I love it. I love that. Like, it's very hard to keep entrepreneurs, I suppose, from doing their things. Even if they're trapped in their dorm room, they're going to make something happen. So made me think of that, because I was like, man, like, I wonder if you guys got in trouble in the same way.
Yeah, it's just funny how it all kind of trickles down, right? Where whether it was completely thought out, I think we're moving too quickly to argue, we still are now, where we're just so focused on what's ahead of us, where maybe it wasn't that it was the most calculated moves, where naturally we're kind of just falling into the deep end and we're building our parachute on the way down. But I think that's what kind of allowed us to grow so quickly, where we weren't thinking about too calculated, where we're saying, okay, well, is this worth a full venture? Is this worth the time? We just knew that there was a gap. There was a lot of customers reaching out to us the second we launched our website. So let's do this for a year or two. Worst comes to worst, we have a warehouse that can handle all of our products. So it was a very natural fit, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that vein, this is a question that I wanted to ask you later, but I feel like, we're talking about this almost like split identity you had going on, full-time student and founder running a successful business. I was wondering, how are you able to do that? And do you have any tips on how to juggle that full-time job, business owner, with actually doing your studies on the side?
It's a great question, Sam. And I get this a lot from like student entrepreneurs, because I do a lot of the sessions around the universities. The short answer is you can't. at face value. And it's usually not the answer everyone wants to hear. But when it comes down to really building a business, it's very difficult to balance a work-life balance. And once you contribute that into university, you also have your socials, you have your academics, you have your kind of post, which might be like intramurals, or maybe it's clubs that you want to get involved with. And then you have the business. So I think for me, it was more about where do I prioritize? And if there is fires, more about how do I get comfortable with fires and maybe things not being able to get handled right at the beginning. So I think a lot came down to, which I think was super interesting, was that there wasn't too many individuals building companies in university. My thought process was that, well, this time in university to do this, I almost have this like free time where it's like risk free. It's trial free. It's university, right? Like in my kind of thought process is you could build 12 businesses. And if they don't work, you're still in university. I feel like it's a safe zone where you're kind of allowed to do whatever you want and kind of be free to make these decisions before maybe you have to step into the corporate world. And I speak to a lot of students that they want to build a business after university because there's too much happening. But I feel like you get into this little groove where it almost feels like its own little world when you're in university. So I was like, why don't we just tap into this, make the most out of this opportunity? And if not, we still have a couple years of studies left. We can figure things out, but at least you can get a couple swings at bat before you even think about graduating. So it comes with a pretty unique twist, but I think the key things was just how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway from it, where we can't handle everything. I had to wear a lot of hats, whether it was a warehouse manager in the morning, it was student in the afternoon, it was customer support in the evening. The juggle is very difficult, but I think if you can kind of find harmony and kind of disorganized balance, I think it's the best way to tackle it, especially when you're in your earliest startup phases. You need to be scrappy. There's really no way around it.
It's such a great perspective. I hadn't really heard anyone say it that way before, where it's like, why not try and fail? I mean, in uni, you probably got a dorm, you've got a place to live, you've got something else to do during the day. If that business doesn't work out, you've got your support network, probably a better support network of your friends around you than you may ever have when you're out on your own. Why not try? But I appreciate that you also said it's very difficult to do full time on both, right? Like to juggle those fires, and ultimately you may have to make some choices. I think it's realistic, right? But how cool to hear you say like, yeah, well, look at uni as a time to actually try and fail. Because I think way too many students are out there. Well, I'm coming from a US perspective, usually getting into a lot of debt when they're, and they're like, man, really not keen on taking too many risks when you got a lot of debt on the line. But that is probably the best time for you to really make a mark and put yourself out there before you're out in the quote unquote real world, where it can
it's like a bubble, right?
Yeah, it's so a bubble. It's an expensive bubble, but it's a bubble.
It's a very expensive bubble. Yeah.
But I miss being fed and having a dining hall? Like that was great. I should have taken way more risks back then. Someone fed me. That was awesome. Well, that's cool. So I appreciate your perspective on that. Taking a step back, talking about what you had developed, this kind of crazy trajectory. All of a sudden you're on, this thing is growing. Something that came to my mind reading about your story and what you've been doing was like, why come up with your own shipping solution? Because surely that's got to be daunting to try to solve not just your own shipping problems, but to do it for others as well. Like it's one thing to be like, I'm going to do this for myself and my business. And then all of a sudden people are coming to you and be like, well, can you do it for me too? And all of a sudden that amplifies and that amplifies. Like, as an outside perspective, I feel like it's like a no shit moment. So I'm just curious, like, did that feel like daunting? Or was this like, yes, this is the thing I want to pursue, and I really am excited to try to figure out these problems and give solutions?
It's a great question. I think the key was that I kind of had a thought process that once we grow, these issues will go away. And I thought whether it was hiring issues or operations issues or just difficulties of scaling, for whatever reason, I thought after maybe year 2 or as we got into year 3 that they would disappear. But boy, could I be wrong. I think what ended up happening was they just amplified. They're bigger issues, they're bigger fires, there's bigger complexity, where now if you're managing multiple warehouses and now we're adding new software and we're bringing on aggregators, it never kind of tuned away. It just amplified. I always had a knack for problem solving. My kind of breadth is in marketing. And coming from that background, it wasn't that I took logistics courses in school. It wasn't like I had a background or degree in warehousing, but I had this kind of underdriving passion to be able to enable brands on Amazon. because I just saw this huge struggle, and it came from me in the university dorm room to people that had to be shipping pallets to their garage door and trying to deal with this. And I just knew that founders had a lot more opportunity to spend their time on things that mattered, whether it was marketing, focusing on growing their business, than labeling 1,000 products that need to be going up to Amazon. So I think it was the idea of like removing key people and talented people to do what they can do best. I think that was super motivating. And then I think the driver that continued to demotivate, because so you can only label so many boxes before, of course, there's a demotivation scale, because there's only so many pallets you can handle before you're saying, okay, is this worth it? Right? Especially in those early stages where it's just me, myself, and I doing these and trying to figure out the entire warehousing structure or how to manage a warehouse or what system processes before I actually had a full team to help me with this. So I think the thing that kept me motivated was once I started hiring employees and had this kind of realization that I had more of a responsibility than just myself and what was this more of a side hustle, but I have a responsibility for my team now. I think this helped me mature, but then also think about my business differently where, okay, it's not just about me. This is about a team of people. This is about the food on the tables for their families. Like it goes a lot deeper and there's a lot more weight on your shoulders when you start thinking like this. But there's also this kind of underlying drive where if we can support more people and grow this big ass team out, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You kind of get to build your own dream team, which I think is incredible, but then you also get to support them with their careers and their living and what they do. So it was a balance of both.
Amazing. Yeah. And like you said, it's livelihood. It's all different. When you were talking about you being by yourself, I see you like, I don't know, with like a label in a box and just kind of staring out into space being like, is this it? Is this all? Is this what I'm doing? Versus all of a sudden it's like, ooh, this is quite serious. It's like the livelihood of my team. It's these business owners. Like there's a lot at stake. But I mean, you stumbled onto something so profoundly powerful for people, which is like, I think when you and I were talking offline, it can be deemed as something like unsexy. The logistics part, I mean, it is a lifeblood at the same time. It is an incredible thing to be involved in and learn how to do and do it correctly. Like you make a profound impact. What you're saying before about like just managing fires, I guess maybe again as an outsider, that's what I think of when I think of logistics and stuff. I can imagine it's just a lot of being a firefighter along the way. It's one thing I wanted to ask you about because it's not just logistics, right? Where you're kind of always managing fires. You know, if we were to talk about the Amazon landscape today, for example, I'm curious, you know, what are the fires and biggest pain points that you're seeing for sellers? I mean, if we're going to start planting some seeds, we've got shipping crisis, we've got pandemic changes, inventory limits, you name it, right? I'm sure this is probably like almost like a question involved. You need like a drink to answer it. But from a high level for like everyone out on the outside who doesn't know, walk me through, what is it that you're facing today?
Oh, 100%. I think one drink's an understatement, Sarah.
Yeah.
I think the one key to kind of notice is that our company, we're still incredibly young. We have like a parent company that's helped us grow. But when it comes down to us, we've only been around now 4 years. So a lot of our growth is being kind of mid-pandemic, which adds its a whole other world of curveballs. So when COVID first started, we were labeled as an essential business, which adds a whole different layer of obviously stresses and complexity because we weren't helping a lot of sellers do labeling for their couches or their bed sheets. We were helping these like global companies with like PPE fulfillment, with last mile grocery delivery because there was no groceries in store. So the flour that seller Y was going to list on Amazon, they now need to fulfill it to local grocery stores. And we were fulfilling to hospitals and preparing these PPE products. Of course, added a whole different layer when you're there 12 o'clock at night handling masks and obviously with a big question mark of like, what is COVID at the time when everything was first starting? Everyone's heard enough COVID stories because I think now what is happening is that the supply chain crisis is obviously being crazy. Everything from like the cost of freight going up to this kind of huge population of new 3PLs. The logistics in the space is now increasing complexity because as aggregators are coming in and kind of just causing mucks into the water. I think what we're seeing the most of, and this is where I've been kind of emphasizing a lot of my conversation, is it's about the ripple effect of what happened the past 2 years. Now we're seeing, some things are stabilizing, whether it's like the shipping costs or delays in fulfillment and Amazon's inventory limits, but no one really is having too much conversations about what the next 2 to 3 years looks like because everyone's costs are now going up. So every new price on Amazon is going to increase. The cost per click on Amazon is accelerated dramatically, even over Christmas. So we're dealing with kind of just, it's a lot of kind of gray and a lot of question marks in the space where there's a lot of new services popping up. Amazon is obviously the biggest space. And I think kind of to add to all the complexity, the aggregator and acquisition space have just made it 1,000 times more difficult because they're coming in with a whole different slew of now private equity money. They're buying all these businesses. They're buying 2 a week, 3 a week, and they're focused on one thing, which was growth. But then we have an operations and warehouse where they are just looking at top line and buying these new businesses. But the kind of the ripple effect of buying 12 companies in a month causes a very big disruption in the supply chain. And that was basically us just having to take those punches round on round over the past year, trying to deal with their growth and obviously the growth of every brand on Amazon, essentially.
Wow. I mean, I hear all that. And the thing that comes to my mind was like, one, how in the world did you manage to pivot around those challenges, especially when it's like your customers? It's you dealing with them, but in a way you're dealing with that for your customers. And then two, it's like, is there really a key to navigating instability like that? I don't even know if you can deduce it to one thing, but I'd be curious if there's a magic bullet because I want one.
I wish there was, and I see it a lot from the acquisition space, and obviously everything with Empire, it's very natural fitting. A lot of these kind of acquisition firms, they didn't really know an answer because they hired a lot of just very talented people around the world to try to figure these problems out. It's like a good soccer team, right? Like you need the mesh, you need the time in to try to figure out how to grow a company and how to stabilize logistics and figure out how to fulfill 100,000 orders, right? But I think what's really helped us, and I think is probably the most valuable part, as we've been growing, one of my kind of major auras of focus was a lot of what we did, Sarah, was we were very pirate ship with the way that we operated as kind of these e-commerce pirates. And it was scrappy. Our processes were uninformed. We get products into the warehouse and we figure the flames out as we speak. And it was a very scrappy way to get us to a more stable place in our company growth. And it's natural. I think a lot of founders are actively in this, what I call kind of a pirate ship-like stage, where it's very disorganized. It's very day-to-day. They're hyper involved in everything because there's no real systems or processes. And our objective over the past 18 months, especially with everything COVID, was that how do we turn this pirate ship into a Navy fleet? And I think this kind of analogy goes so far where instead of the scrappy processes of a pirate and kind of just figuring things out, we're going into a Navy fleet where there's dedicated people, there's dedicated process. If a pen is moved from part 1 to part 2, just like in a Navy fleet, everything is documented and with a full systems in place. So our ethos, and it's damn well harder said than done, and we're still figuring out the best ways to do it. But how do you get to your stage in your company where now you operate like a Navy fleet? And these processes are so concrete that whether you're in it or not, these processes will withstand whether it's a punch or someone trying to run completely through the wall. So I think it's the best way to explain it is that building these systems to scale, this I think has been the best thought process for us because it's this idea of having really concrete systems that can land the test of time.
Yeah. So less Captain Jack Sparrow,
Less Captain Jack Sparrow.
And I'm like totally amiss for, I'm like, who could I say? Who's an equivalent in the Navy? I'm sure there's, this is where my lack of, let's say, movie knowledge, something Navy related. Everyone out there.
Someone will say something.
They will. And they're just like, how did you not think of? And I'm like, Captain Jack Sparrow was just easy. No, I think that you're totally on the ball on that, especially in your world, right? Like, it's gotta be tip-top shape. If it's not, especially in the world of logistics, like things come crashing down. This is not where you want to experience a bad domino effect. So I think that's a pretty powerful lesson to have learned. I guess, transitioning into the world of lessons, I would love to know from your perspective, what are some ways that Amazon sellers could streamline their logistics? What's like some high-level stuff we can walk through and give sellers?
Yeah, I think without sounding naive, a lot of it's about process management. In the warehousing world, so what we see is majority of Amazon sellers, unless they're at a kind of a maturity state in their life cycle, they're utilizing some form of third-party logistics or third-party warehouses, whether that's from the way that product moves from China to Canada to just using kind of a local warehouse down the street from you. Some brands aren't at that stage because they're obviously maybe labeling the products themselves. They kind of fall into that first bracket that I was talking about in my story, where they're just kind of shipping it, and between them and the kids, they may have a really good process, but they might still be doing it themselves. From a logistics space, and I speak especially from a warehousing capacity, is that right now in kind of the 3PL world, which is kind of all the warehouses across US and Canada, businesses take almost like a Starbucks approach to it. And we see this with aggregators too. So don't think that it's only you guys from Amazon sellers doing it. These billion-dollar private companies are dealing with very similar issues. It's just at an amplified level. But a lot of businesses, what they're doing is they'll utilize a suite of warehouses that are more like state dependent, Sarah. So they'll have a warehouse in New Jersey, they'll have a warehouse in California, they'll have a warehouse in Toronto, and they might have one in Florida. And the thought process of the seller is, from a very kind of micro level, how do we make sure that the shipping cost to Amazon or the shipping to the customer as cheap as humanly possible? Or if they're shipping their products from overseas, obviously they need a warehouse in California. And because of this, they only will use that warehouse in California. And this integrated approach is usually what we've seen be the downfall of a lot of companies, or the reason that they may not get the valuation that they want, or the way that they're not able to scale is because of this kind of fragmented approach to how you think about your inventory and logistics. You nailed it on the head. Like, it's not the sexy part of the company, but it's the most important. That whether you want to scale, whether you want to sell your business, if you don't have product in stock, you're in really big trouble. And it's a very untalked about conversation because it's all about marketing and cost of acquisition and all the, I think, fun stuff that I like talking about too. But the biggest downfall is, instead of choosing maybe one partner or two partners that can really help streamline, and they have the right software, they have the right warehouses, this is what we've seen turn a good seller to a great seller, is optimizing their fulfillment with like a real solid partner that has multiple warehouses. They can expand you to other marketplaces like Shopify and Walmart. These are usually the places that we've seen kind of the biggest levels of success. And I think the second part is just putting a level of attention into kind of the back-end inventory management, right? We're living now, when it comes to Seller Central, especially with IPI scores, is a great example, which obviously every brand has inventory limits and inventory issues and product outages, and they're thinking about maybe fulfillment by merchant models or anything to just make sure that product continues to move. But in hindsight, if you just had a real strong partner on the back end, or maybe you had your own warehouse and just kind of doubled down on more systems and more team to confidently fulfill products, this is usually the most underlining value that is most overlooked, that they think the small warehouse in New York might allow them to get to the 7-figure mark, or of course, kind of the unspoke 8-figure mark in the revenue. But what we see is that it takes one business to get to 7 figures, but it takes a operations-driven business to get to 8 figures. So marketing can get you to 7, but the logistics and the infrastructure and the system management will get you to 8. And kind of retweaking your mindset to think like that once you get kind of over these hurdles, these are usually the biggest ones that we've seen, that once they have that down, the only issue is making sure that more people buy your product and expanding marketplaces and getting the Shopify and all these other places. But you can't get to Walmart.com if we don't have product inside a warehouse that can get there in 1 to 2 days. So it comes down to getting the product to the customers as quickly as possible. And in my opinion, long story short, the most underutilized part of every Amazon company right now is that they just don't want to look at it because it's the boring stuff. It's the stuff that no one really wants to look at a spreadsheet all day about versus optimizing their images. A bit of a different and unique perspective. But I think this is kind of the conversations I want to be talking about with sellers, because it's the route less spoken. I think it's the best way to say it.
No, I appreciate that perspective. I mean, like you were saying, it can feel boring. It's not as fun as doing imagery, but I think in a way it's got to feel painful as well. There's like an element of feeling a little bit less in control, despite, doing everything you can sometimes, right?
It's overwhelming. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, it's not easy. There's not a lot of ways to learn it until you're in it. It's like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
You can't plan a lot of this on Amazon. So if they cut your inventory, or your shipping goes up, or your warehouse can't fulfill the orders in time, like you're at the mercy of these beasts. And at face values, there's only so many things that you have inside your control. So I think there's a huge piece, and this is what I'm really trying to focus on, is the education around this and the prioritization of logistics and supply chain. And we're seeing it from the top down. Like, I think it's super unique and refreshing because we work with a lot of acquisitions and private equity firms. And because of this, we get to see from kind of the top of the top, whether it's the largest sellers or the aggregators and acquisition firms, we get to see the product come in. So we have a really good pulse on whether it's like category demand, where they're prioritizing their employees and hiring more. And the biggest place that we're seeing this double down in investment is international, software, and logistics. And these are the three places that we're seeing kind of this double down effect where they're hiring more, they're building more, and they're expanding. And they're doing it very, very quickly. It's our jobs as small businesses and sellers to think about, how do we replicate what we know the biggest and largest funded companies and sellers are doing? And let's recreate this. It doesn't need to be at a $100 million scale. Let's replicate this for the small private label brand, right? How do we configure some of these best practices of the big boys and we mimic them into almost these bite-sized pieces? So it's super interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. You're like an accidental, almost like parrot of a lot of the content we've been putting out. We're always trying to tell people, like, you should play like the big players. There's things going on that they're doing that it's like, there's almost like, if you can't beat them, join them, or at least act like them. And that's kind of the best you can do, right? With everything going on. But I love hearing you talk about all this because you've just got a very specific way of approaching it, saying like, this is how you can do it. It's totally possible. Break it down and do these things. Earlier, when you were talking about, getting that punch in the face, I thought that was funny because it makes me think of, a question that we commonly ask people. We always need to talk about, the face punches. We need to talk about the mistakes. So walk me through what kind of mistakes, face punches, if you will, do you commonly see sellers make when it comes to their logistics?
This is a good one. So what we've seen, and you can tell I get really excited when we dive into these things, is one of the biggest mistakes, and I think this translates to more about their overall strategy, is we don't see a lot of brands contributing all the costs when they're making decisions on Amazon. And I'll dive into it a little bit more. For example, we work with this supplement company here in Canada. They do all these different pre-workouts, protein powders. They're big in the influencer space. Really cool company. But one of the key issues was that they were doing advertising, they were launching new products, and they were looking at these kind of very isolated targets, right? And anyone in the advertising space, they were looking at their return on ad spend with their ROAS, they were looking at their TACOs, their ACOS. And I was speaking to them because they would utilize these really large agencies. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. This must consider all your fees, right? If you're thinking about the return on advertising, you guys must be thinking about how much it costs to fulfill from the 3PL you were looking at, right? And they're like, well, no, we look at what we're doing on Amazon. What's the return on ad spend? What's the cost of driving a new customer? But this very small kind of gap was that they weren't contributing, okay, what was the cost of their warehouse to fulfill this order? How did they contribute the percentage of sellable returns into their overall advertising performance? What was kind of the unforeseen revenue because they were out of stock on 3 products and they can't get it in because they can't fulfill Amazon fast enough? So one of the biggest downfalls we've seen is brands not taking a logistics first approach to, in summary, like from one of the major takeaways, if we think about it from more of like a strategy perspective, is we just don't see a lot of brands looking at that numbers and that sort of data where, okay, well, your cost of shipping to Amazon was X. Why aren't you considering this in kind of your total cost of products? Or how are we thinking about our advertising strategy? Because whether it's an agency or maybe they're handling it themselves, like there's not a lot of ways to contribute your cost of goods or how much the warehouse is charging you. Like one of the 3PLs in California or New Jersey is charging you for storage, right? And these biggest gaps cause a huge skew in your numbers. And some people don't get to look that deep under the hood until maybe they're thinking about selling their business to a marketplace like Empire, right? I think that's one of the biggest takeaways of information that I think sellers can take away is kind of this backwards forward approach to their strategy, where of course you need to consider product demand and launching, but let's consider all the not so fun parts about it, right? And what's the issues of chargebacks from the warehouse because they drop the ball so often, right? Or they can't do FBM. And because of that, you can't fulfill orders when they're out of stock. So these strategies, I think, are the most important. I think the other one that we've seen be kind of a huge game changer for brands, obviously, one, because of all the issues with inventory limits, one of the really cool takeaways that we've seen, and it's more attributed to advertising because that's kind of the conversation a lot of people like having about, if they're expanding marketplaces. So obviously I'm here in Canada, Sarah, as you know, and because of this, we're seeing a lot of kind of the big boys really expand their product lines into Amazon Canada. And this isn't expanding in terms of your products in a US warehouse and you're using a program called NARF, which is North America Remote Fulfillment, which means that Amazon US will store the product and you'll list it on Amazon Canada, kind of like how you'd list it on Amazon Mexico, Sarah, but it's not Prime. So how it looks in Canada is it usually takes, 7 to 14 days to get here. There's duties and imports. So when this product arrives to my house in Toronto, I'm going to have to pay a pretty handsome fee to get the products here. And a lot of companies don't know this. So when they think about expanding, they thought, okay, we'll just click Enable Canada. And this will kind of expand our Canadian horizon and offer our products up to all these brand new customers. But they end up doing themselves a disservice because they're using their US warehouses, Amazon FBA warehouses, which obviously have a limit of how much inventory you can store. So the alternative route is getting it to an actual Amazon Canada warehouse. So then it's Amazon Prime, it's more conversion friendly. We can actually get it in 2 days. And unless you're in Canada, you don't have to deal with this, but there's not as much product offering on Amazon Canada. So there's still a lot of times where I did one today. I try not to, but I still do. Is I bought a product from Amazon.com. So I think it will get here, I think in like 9 days. And it was around $100 item. So there'll be duties and imports on that too. So I'll probably end up paying maybe like $115, $120 in total for a really bad customer experience. So we're seeing it from kind of the biggest companies where when they're expanding, they're going kind of all the way into the deep end. And they're making sure their Amazon Canada actually has product here. So it's Prime, your advertising is more profitable. You're actually competing on kind of a brand new landscape. And Amazon Canada is a very uncharted landscape. I think it's a really cool way that outside of obviously all the logistics and telling everyone to basically clean up shop with how they look at their strategy, if we're thinking about expanding, why don't we just look next door? Like I love Walmart and I love all the other channels, but you can naturally open your product up to another 30 million customers here in Canada by just naturally sending product to another warehouse here in Canada. So it's usually one of the most underutilized, but I think it's one of the most undervalued, where you can enable kind of this global e-commerce strategy with naturally just sending products an extra location away.
I think everything you just said is probably going to be a light bulb moment for many people listening to this going, either one, really excited about the prospect of selling in Canada, or two, they've either are on the cusp of it or probably already am seeing what you're saying, where it's like you try to just expand into Canada without as much of a plan and doing it from the US. And if, you can do it clumsily and you can do it with a lot of cost and a lot of unhappy customers if you do it that way. I feel bad now. I mean, I'm not in that much of a huff about it, but I'm waiting on a product right now that I ordered. It was supposed to be 2-day shipping, and now it's turned into like 6. And it's not that big of a deal for me. And I'm used to living outside of the States. So I've not got accustomed to like, getting what I want when I want it. But wild to think that in Canada, you guys can simply, how often that must happen to you and how annoying that's got to be, especially from a customer experience perspective, like you were saying.
Completely agree. Yeah, I think it's all about customer experience, right? And I think what is happening is that it's coming to a race to a bottom. Amazon's getting really damn quick. And even brands that are expanding, whether it's the Walmart, obviously there's like a Deliver in the US, which is like fast tags and getting it there in 48 hours. But it's not the same in Canada because obviously shipping is a lot more expensive and we don't have kind of seller fulfilled Prime and all these other features here in Canada. But it comes down to it that whether you're on Amazon or you're expanding your brand to Shopify, to Walmart, to all the other places to diversify the brand, it comes down to an Amazon Prime-like experience. And in reality, if you can't get it there as quickly as someone that could purchase off Amazon, unless they're a real diehard brand loyalist, or maybe it's a very unique and innovative product that's not on Amazon, and it's hard to find, is that you're going to be in a pretty tricky situation over the next 2 to 3 years because this idea of micro fulfillments. And in a lot of these major cities, you can order product and get it to you in 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Wow. Yep.
And we're seeing this translate, obviously right now it's grocery stores, but the next natural steps is micro fulfillment centers. And there's a lot of money going into this because it's the fastest to the customer wins. And Amazon is really damn good at it. And it just means that as you think about whether it's off channel, whether you think about growing just a total e-commerce brand outside of just an Amazon company, like a real firm and a real kind of global e-commerce brand, it's going to come about how fast can you get your products to the customer's hands. And I think this is who's going to win the races outside of dominating Amazon, because there's really big companies getting into the space. You can absolutely still get into Amazon, but it's just more competitive. And you have to be a bit more, I think, scrappy or pirate ship in terms of how you get into the market. But we're dealing with these really large companies that can buy 2 businesses a week, can buy 3 businesses a week. The approach that we just need to take, it just needs to change. The strategy is still the same. It's just the path that we're taking to get there and the things that we can do to be a bit more agile with how we think about it, whether it is Amazon Canada, whether it's getting products to customers faster. It's the unspoken truth that I think is going to turn these kind of good companies into great.
Wow. Sitting back and listening to you talk about all this, it's impressive because it's clearly there's a lot happening. And it's certainly been a lot happening during the pandemic, like we talked about. Not to mention you were doing this, starting in school, and now you're not long out of school, and you've arrived at this place where, AMZ Prep was ranked the fastest growing startup in Canada. That's wild. I mean, just in light of everything you're saying, it's so impressive to see where you've landed today. And I can't help but wonder what in the world was the secret to your success to be able to reach that.
I appreciate it, Sarah. I think what's driven the success of AMZ, I think it's being so focused on the outcome that you're not even looking at kind of this long-term trajectory. I think I'm so passionate about what's happening today and how deep we are into it that almost drives the success, where there's so much gray area. So all you can sort of do is just put your head down and continue to grow and continue to build what you envision you want the company to be. I wish there was kind of this idea behind the plan and exactly how it happened. I think the plan for me is being so invested that you don't know where the trajectory of the company is going to go and how fast it's going to get there. But you just know damn well that you're going to wake up the next day and you're going to do the exact same thing. And it's this consistency over everything that I think has allowed us to get to where we are. And I think the most exciting part is when we think about this, we're nowhere near where we want to be. And I think this is always it, right? Like, we're not a huge organization. And it's a lot of like the Amazon sellers listening, where we can think like the big sellers, but we always can't operate like them. But if we have that mindset for the strategy and how we think, naturally things just start to fall into place. So I think the recommendation and the secret is building something that you want to build and being passionate about it really goes a long way, as cliche as it sounds. And I think timing really does matter. I think we still could build a great company if we started the same company now or we started a few years beforehand. But I think depending on the trajectory and how quickly you want to grow, I think timing is absolutely of the essence. So if there's entrepreneurs thinking about starting that new side hustle, I promise you the time to start is now. And we're seeing a lot of new businesses doing this. And whether it's launching new brands or launching new products, there's no better time. So I think it's just jumping into the deep end, jumping off the cliff and building your parachute on the way down. I think this is the most calculated approach to trying to grow an e-commerce company, where the e-commerce landscape itself is growing faster than you. So you can't plan 10 steps ahead because you'll get punched by step number 2. You just have to be okay with this because there's no way to plan that far ahead. You can have the plan of action, but just expect that road's going to get pretty messy pretty quickly.
That's interesting. I guess it's not the industry for control freaks, right? Like you said, you can't see that far ahead, guys. I can't master plan this one. You just got to go. You just got to do it.
Yeah. And I think there's calculation, but I think it's risk-driven calculation. So you can have a formula for success, but just make sure there's a buffer there, which is a few extra years of rolling up your sleeves and putting that hard work in. And I think it's a formula for success.
It's Beautiful. Well, this has been so much fun, Blair, learning so much about industry and your story and the absolute wildness of logistics. I think for anyone out there who maybe had a perception of, like we were saying before, logistics maybe being unsexy, I think this brings it a whole lot of new color and certainly shows the liveliness and dynamicness of the industry. So thank you for painting that for us. Typically, I like to wrap these up with just a couple rapid fire questions. If you're cool with that, I can kick one off.
I'd love to hear it. Absolutely. Awesome. Fire them away.
Sometimes they're the hardest because people have a hard time being rapid fire. So
I'm ready for it.
All right. So first question, what are the best hidden growth opportunities within Amazon FBA?
We just did something on this. My biggest bets going into 2022, 2023, TikTok and Amazon attribution. I'll take a non-logistics approach because I think everyone's heard enough of this. I'm so bullish on TikTok for direct-to-consumer brands. It's not even funny, Sarah. I think it's so underutilized right now, and the ability for a brand to reach as many customers for the sheer amount of organic ability, it's Facebook 2014. I think that's the best way to say it. So I see a lot of opportunity being off-channel. On-channel, of course, there's a lot of rollouts with Amazon, and there's a lot of cool things happening. But if you're looking for that outside approach, whether it's global domination and expanding internationally, outside of that, I'm betting big on TikTok.
Awesome. Really, really cool.
I feel like it wasn't so rapid fire, Sarah, but
No. Well, you know what? When you have a good answer, it's okay to not be rapid fire. I love that. So I guess in a similar vein, what would you say are tools or resources that people can use to streamline their logistics?
You know what I've been trying to build internally, and I've been even just trying to do it myself, is I do a lot of listening without as much execution. I'll share a couple of resources, but I think this kind of 10-to-1 rule is something I'm really trying to echo inside my company, and hopefully with the sellers, you guys might be able to do the same, is that for every 10% you learn, your execution should be 90%. So that means every hour you learn, whether it's a new thing or listening to a podcast or watching a video, it should be followed by 10 hours of execution and trial and error. Because I kind of fall into a lot of the information trap where it can be a vicious circle, especially for Amazon sellers. There's a lot of podcasts specifically training Amazon sellers about very technical things. There's a lot of YouTube, there's a lot of Facebook groups, but it doesn't follow this kind of 10-to-1 ratio of execution to learn. So when it comes down to learning logistics, there's not a ton of amazing quality content out there. Without selfishly plugging, like we have some really cool content, but YouTube is honestly a great place to start, especially if you're just starting how to coordinate Seller Central or figuring out how to do your shipment plans or figuring out some of the compliance, like how to label a product or polybag it. There's some really cool videos online. But at the end of the day, if you're a seller getting into it or trying to learn about logistics, just get yourself into that space, right? Whether it's like following voices that are in the logistics space, they might not be the funnest, but it's really damn important to learn this stuff. But I think what it comes down to is follow the 10-to-1 when it comes to logistics. Whether you're actively managing it, whether it's someone on your team, or you are utilizing a warehouse, the deeper you get in and hands-on, I think this approach follows the entire company. Learn, but act and test and trial at a multiple much faster. It will get you, I think, where you want to go much quicker instead of this kind of information, I think, stall or overload, which I think usually happens with a lot of sellers. They get into this weird situation where they learn a lot of different tactics and they almost kind of sit there going, I just learned 12 ways how to advertise a product. Now I don't know which one to do. So dive into the deep end, build your parachute on the way down. The business won't explode. You'll be okay. You'll figure it out. Something's going to break and a pipe's going to burst. Just bring the duct tape and you can get back to work.
That's awesome advice. I feel that one is especially relevant. It's so easy to get caught in that information loop. Absorbing without doing, totally guilty of that. Junkie
I'm
for
the exact same way.
Yeah,
I love it. I listen to so many podcasts, like especially when I was getting started in Amazon, the sheer amount of like the really early stage Amazon podcasts, it was a fire hose of how much information I was trying to take in. And I'd listen to 5 or 6 podcasts about how to advertise, and I'd pull back at the end of the day. And I'm just like, what did I just learn? There was no actionability, and I didn't even have a product ready. I was like, you know what? And I'm still kind of running through these loops today. And Sarah, it sounds like the same thing. So it doesn't end. Now I'm getting to this place where I'm trying to optimize it, because if you can fail and fail really damn fast, you can just get to where you want to go so much faster.
Oh, 100%. It's fantastic advice. It's something that as I'm weird. I feel like my New Year starts in February. I'm not a January New Year's person. My new stuff starts in the next month and I don't know what that is. So right now I am looking at the next year going, okay, what am I going to implement or what are the goals? And
That's
I think
very
that's
cool.
a great one. Yeah. So I'll definitely try to implement that.
I try to do that in December. So December on a weird day, like if it's a new gym thought process or plan, and I'm saying this, it's not as textbook in terms of execution, but like starting something mid-December, just because it was someone, I think Mark Samuel, he owns this company in the US called I1 and he's a big influencer, but it's the idea of like, just start going to the gym on a Thursday and set that precedent, because like that will do wonders versus having to wait until this kind of arbitrary day that you need to start the business, that you need to wait till the first of next month, or you have to wait until you move out of XYZ, or when you get the new job. I think starting that sets the most that's super interesting. That February thing, I might need to do that.
As an accident, I just realized this is like the first year that I've meditated. I'm about to hit my meditation 1-year anniversary, and then just some other habits, journaling and things like that. And I didn't even expect me to keep up with it. And then I realized, I was like, as in February. And then when I started thinking about it, a lot of my biggest life moves accidentally, moving countries, doing some serious big things always happen to be in February. So now I'm deciding New Year, New Me happens in February, abandoning the January crowd. That's too much pressure. I'll get around to it.
What are some things, Sarah, for you in terms of things that you might be able to recommend to the listeners? I feel like they get a lot of our voices, but not too much of yours. What do you recommend? Do you have any tactics that sellers can take away? Like, and these don't always have to be e-commerce things. Like the meditation, I think, is a gem, right? In terms of what they can potentially do to calm themselves and things holistically. Is there anything else that you're doing that might help?
Well, thank you for asking. I think one thing I found, and this was, again, it was like a total fluke thing. I didn't expect to keep up with it. At the same time that I started meditating, I found this really cool Medium article, and maybe I can track it down and put it in the show notes, but it was on this guy invented a square journaling. You get like a bullet journal and you create these little squares and you create little...
I've seen those.
Yeah, it's like you're making little symbols to track the things that you did during the day, but you can also use it to track goals. And I was like, I'll give it a shot, but I'm so bad at journaling and things like that. I'll never stick with it. And then somehow I did. And then I found that it's been so handy and I loved it because you're taking like a quick note about a memory from the day. So it's really cool to look back on. But then when did you sleep? What did you eat? Did you meditate? Did you exercise? Did you stay off social media like you had planned that day? Like you just have visibility. Time passes a lot. And I think we're all guilty of this and we're just trying to survive day to day. And then we just have no idea how we ended up to the next week or the next month or the next year. And that's how stuff gets lost and you don't move ahead. So you kind of have to actually look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and have some like track record for it to know, am I doing what I want to do with my life? And I found this to be super helpful and super weird. And again, I am not a habit sticker. Can't believe I did it, but here I am. And I hope to stick with it for years to come.
Yeah, the one other takeaway I think will be super valuable. I know I didn't really get to mention too many kind of tools or resources we use. The biggest game changer, I think, in our company has been a tool called Notion. Have you heard it before?
I think so.
It's absolutely incredible. Whether it's like on your personal management of like your life, your goals, our entire company is kind of built into this. I think my team gets upset because I talk about it so much. I should be almost like an influencer for this thing.
I totally feel you on that. I've got a couple tools that way. I'm like, someone send me an affiliate link because like I'm killing it out here. I'm an evangelist.
If I had $1 for every single one, Notion has been a game changer. I would definitely take a look at anyone's looking at like managing systems or has a lot of ideas on their head and wants to organize it, or similar to what you were just mentioning, Sarah, where there's like habit tracker. There's some really cool stuff you can do inside of it. So if you're a bit techie and you like to nerd out, Notion has kind of been the biggest game changer off Amazon. And of course, there's tons of tools in terms of on Amazon. But if you're going to find one thing and pull one thing from it, check out Notion. I think it will really help.
Awesome. I just wrote that down for me to check that out. Might be better than me carrying around my little
I'm hearing
notebook.
Raving reviews is the idea over the next few weeks. I promise you, it's a game changer. I can't explain it. And I really hope you see the same, or anyone listening who doesn't like it, I'm so sorry. Try it out for a week and then message me on LinkedIn or something if it works to the wonders that you guys are expecting.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, this is great because I feel like we've given people so many different ways to optimize. Now, I like to wrap up the podcast with probably the hardest question of the entire podcast. So if you're ready to face it, we can get into it. What has been your funniest moment working within logistics?
Give me a second. Let me just think about this. The funniest moment working in
It's
logistics.
the toughest question. This is the one that people get most worried about before they come on the podcast. Like, I saw that question at the end. I don't really know what to do. I'm like, yeah, you're not alone.
I didn't see this question. I didn't see the question.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a curveball. When it comes to the funniest, there's a lot of small ones that I think kind of contribute to it. But I think the biggest one that was kind of, I'll go with two. Hopefully that's fair. The one that I think was almost at like a make or break time for the company is we're in, I think it was like warehouse number 2, Sarah. It was small and it was way too full. And we overpromised some very big brands that we could store their product. And it was, I think like the carriers didn't pick up and it was an absolute nightmare. So we had way too much product there. And we ended up getting a call that we had another, I think it was like 2 or 3 truckloads of product that just arrived for this really big company at the time. And like the pits in my stomach of trying to figure out what to do with, I think it's around 100 pallets. For context, Sarah, the entire warehouse probably holds 30, maybe.
Oh, no.
So it wasn't even near being able to. So what we ended up having to do, Sarah, was we ordered, I think it was like 5 or 6 U-Hauls because we had planned for all these containers to show up. So they didn't show up yet. We just got called and said, hey, we have a bunch of these pallets. Like they're all coming to you guys in the morning. And we're like, okay. I was like, let's plan this bad boy. So what we did, and we didn't have the warehouse space. So I got all my friends from university and we ordered a bunch of U-Hauls, the huge trucks of U-Hauls, because they told us, I think it was like a few 100,000 units that were supposed to show up in the morning. And it was like 8:00 at night. I was like, let's drop everything that we're doing. Let's go and let's just try to figure out how we're going to be able to fulfill these. So my master plan, Sarah, was, okay, we're going to order a bunch of these U-Hauls. All my friends, we're going to pick them up. And then we're basically going to create these like mini warehouses inside each one of the U-Haul trucks. So like we'll go, if there's 100,000 units that need to go out, like we'll bring it to U-Haul 1 with all the back doors open. We'll put tables inside of it. We'll grab labels and we'll just use these as like our own little warehouse stations. We'll have different ones. And on paper, Sarah, it sounded phenomenal. It sounded like I just cheated the system for buying a bigger warehouse. But lo and behold, as you can imagine, this story is not a success story. It's the funny story is in the morning. So I had 8 U-Hauls lined up and picture this dinky little retail store. It was in the middle of this random city. We have 8 U-Haul trucks taking up. And lo and behold, like beside us, there's like a little spa, right? And there's a little like cookie bakery. So like we were completely out of it. And we had these 8 trucks that arrived to the front of this really small boutique office. And I was just mentioning it before, but there was a spa. There was a small little bakery there, Sarah, too. It wasn't the most, I think the word's inviting place to open a warehouse. It was like a retail store on like a random side block. Anyway, so what ended up happening was that when we got the call, we planned for all the trailers to actually get arrived. We pulled them up the next day. We have 8 lined up, ready to go. And we got that initial call saying, hey, we're around back. So I said, okay. I was like, here it begins. And it was only a few pallets. So they opened it up. There was a few pallets. And I was like, is there more trucks? And they're like, yep. I said, okay. So I had one of the trucks go to the back. And we weren't offloading these to the warehouse, Sarah. We pulled another truck up to their truck. And we're just offloading them to our truck, just manually one by one, right? So we're just breaking apart the pallet. We're literally just carrying the boxes. We'd move them to the U-Haul truck, and then we're just rebuilding the pallet over there because that was, for the next few days, going to be our miniature warehouses. We got the first truck done. I was expecting now probably another 8.5 trucks worth, which would take like a day or two full. It would fill up 8 full trucks with pallets head to toe. I got a call from the second one. They said, hey, we showed up. Like, this is the bigger one. We have around 80,000 units. And I said, okay. I was like, we're born for this. We're ready. I was built for this exact situation. We go and they open the truck and there's 1 pallet there.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And I go, okay. I was like, there must be more trucks. And he said, pardon? And I said, just to give you context, there's probably around 15 people ready to rock, paid for the day, like full go mode. And I said, pardon? What do you mean there's only 1 pallet? And I was like, do you have like a packing list? I must be mistaken. And he said, no, like there's around 80,000 units on this one. Sarah, they were stickers.
No!
They were damn stickers. There was 80,000 stickers on this one pallet. And we have these trucks lined up with a bunch of students ready to make history from doing these shipments. And it was one full pallet of all of these random stickers. And like, I see these stickers in my nightmares, Sarah. I don't think until the day I go, I will not envision these again. So my advice, double check the fine print. I overshot by 900,000 units, basically. So I was a bit off the ball, I think is the best way to say it.
Wow, that is epic. But you know what? If anyone out there has a lot of stickers they want to deal with, I think Blair Forrest is your guy.
You know what? Message me beforehand.
Yeah.
It's a bit of PTSD with the stickers. We'll try to make it work, but I need proof beforehand or we'll fall into the same one. I don't think we've done a sticker project since, nor have I been actively looking for one. So it's probably the funniest one. We were so early on that I think I got super excited. And I thought this project was going to fuel the next few months. Like for context, our regular shipment was maybe, I don't know, a couple hundred units. So I saw 100,000 units and I said, we're rich. This is it. This is our breakthrough to get to the next level. And I was thinking about it for weeks on the new warehouse, what amenities. Maybe we can get a cooler in the office now, maybe some swag for the team. I was awfully wrong.
That is like truly epic. I think if there were to be some golden moments on people's funniest stories, I would put that up there because that's a wild one. If you shared that like on other podcasts and things like that.
I've never shared that story before.
What?
No.
Oh, I feel so honored.
Yeah,
yes, guys,
good.
You heard it here.
I try to not bring up that part of my past. On the Ball got me, and it was one I had to share. It's too good not to let go. So the team's going to be laughing about this one because they're the only ones that knew about it. I keep it pretty close to my hip.
I think it's epic, and I think it's a fantastic story. Look, it's obviously not the straw that broke your back per se. You're doing swimmingly, you're doing amazingly. You know, you got past the stickers. And I think that's actually quite inspirational for everyone listening out there going, man, this guy's just like killing it. He's probably like never done anything wrong with stickers before, but here they are. Like we were humanizing you a little bit.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Blair, thank you so much for coming on, for being honest, for sharing all elements of your story. You killed it and offered some really great advice. So I think you're going to really help a lot of sellers out there and people who want to understand logistics a bit better. So thank you. Thank you for offering that to us today.
No, absolutely. And thank you for the tips as well on the meditation and this February. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to talk about this stuff, as you can probably hear. So if there's things you want to learn about, like, feel free to message me, whether it's on LinkedIn at Blair Forrest, get a hold of me. I'm happy to help out and talk shop. I do voice notes very, very often. So I'm happy to overshoot a couple in case you guys need any feedback on whether it's logistics, like choosing a warehousing or 3PL partner, but expanding to Canada. We can go on for days. So I'm happy to help out. And if there's any questions, I really hope someone tells me how much they appreciated Notion. And I'm betting big on it.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. I think you're probably going to start getting a lot of messages here. So it's exciting stuff. Cool. Well, good luck, Blair.
Thank you, Sarah.
Keep killing it in Canada and beyond. And we're looking forward to seeing what you get up to this year.
Absolutely. I'll be talking to you soon. Thanks, Sarah.
Absolutely. You too. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you've walked away with a bit of new insight that'll help you in your digital entrepreneurship journey. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating review. To learn more about businesses available for sale at Empire Flippers, click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.